Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. As promised, we've got something fun from Essen for you. It's Gaia Project, Terra Mystica's spiritual successor, or ghostly half-brother, however you want to describe it. Gaia Project is a heavy Euro game, and involves a lot of economic management and sort of optimization of planning and maneuvering. And it probably takes about an hour to 3 hours, depending on the number of players you've got, and also how much time they spend optimizing their different moves. So I've already opened my copy and unboxed it and sort of put all the player stuff into little baggies and punched out the wooden tokens and stuff. But we'll have a look at what you get in the box so that you understand what all the different components are supposed to be. So we've got a rule book with all the rules in it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different player colors. But don't be fooled. In Terra Mystica, in Gaia Project, so there's 7 player colors, but each player color refers to a sort of a different planet type. You can't actually play with 7 people. The game is for 1 to 4 players. 1 to 4? Yeah, that's right, because there's this automata deck, and there's rules for playing a solo game against an AI opponent. I'm not going to talk about the rules for that mode in this video. This is setup and rules for a 2 to 4 player game. But if you want to know about the solo variant, leave a comment in the description below, and maybe I'll make a video about how to play solo. So 7 player colors, and each color actually refers to a different planet type. There are 2 races who use each color, and then they all have their own planet type. So let's have a quick look here. Oh, here we go. So there are the rules and a reference sheet for the solo mode. And then here are the player boards. And each player board is double-sided with 2 different races, but these are the people who would use the brown tokens, the Taclons and the Ambers. Then you've got the Terrans and the Lantids who use the blue tokens. And they don't actually mention the name of the planet types anywhere on these boards, but their planet type is called Terra. The Taclons, they like swamp planet. So you've got the Geodens and the Baltacs, and they like volcanic planets. We've got the Ivits and the Halas. They're bird people. They like oxide planets. You've got the Itars and the Nevlas, and they like ice planets. We've got the Beskods and the Firax. They're going to be the grey tokens, and they like titanium planets. We've got Gleans and Xenos as well, and they like desert worlds. So those are all your different races, and at the beginning of a game you would pick one each, but I'll be talking through the starting game. So I'm setting up a starting game in which you would use a set 3 races, which are going to be the Geodens, the Taclons, and the Terrans. So you would use these 3 in for a 3-player starting game. If you were going to play a 4-player game, you'd add the Xenos here. And if you were going to play a 2-player game, the Taclons and the Halas. And if you were going to play a 1-player game, it would be the Xenos controlled by the Automata against the Terran. We also get in here 10 planet tiles. We will lay these out later on to make up the board. I'll show you how the different board sizes vary for the different player counts. But you are instructed in advanced play to sort of get creative with the modular board. We've got this. This is the score track around the outside. You'll progress along this track as you go through the game, and at the end you'll get a whole bunch more points based on certain victory conditions. This board also has 6 research columns on it. These columns allow you to do different things as you progress down it and give you different bonuses as well. This one's terraforming, and it allows you to more easily turn planets into planets you can live on. You see, like I said, everybody's associated with a planet type. For example, the Terrans like to live on Terra, and they must convert anything else to Terra, like the desert or the swamp. And if they're going to do that conversion, this makes it easier for them. This one's navigation, and that's like range, and that allows you to spread out to planets that are further away from the ones you already inhabit. So as you improve that, you can go further and further from home. Then you've got this track here. This is called Research, and all that unlocks are what are called Quantum Intelligence Cubes, or QICs. And they're really only useful for taking these 3 actions here, but more on that later. And spending as currency. They're basically just a currency. A fancy, difficult to acquire currency. Then you've got this track here. This is called the Gaia Project track, and that's used for turning trans-dim planets into Gaia planets. And if that sounds complex, don't worry, more on that later. Then you've got the economy track here, and this just lets you get better, gets you more resources every turn, and that's great because, you know, everybody can use more resources. Specifically, this gets you 3 other different kinds of resources in the game: credits, ore, and also power. And power is a little thing that siphons around bowls, a bit like magic. The final column is research, and this column, in fact, improves all your other columns, really. What it does is it allows you to acquire knowledge, which is another resource in the game, and knowledge is spent to move yourself along these tracks. And as you advance towards the end, you get more victory points, you get extra bonuses, and the ability to unlock advanced technologies. But you'll have to found some federations before you can ascend to the very tops of these columns. What's a federation? Well, don't worry, because I'll explain that later. But one thing about Terra Mystica, I'm going to keep saying that. One thing about Gaia Project, like its predecessor, Terra Mystica, is that all the systems are interlinked. And so if you're doing well at one thing, you'll do well at another thing. And you can't really ignore something, because if you do ignore any sort of given system or resource type, then you'll find yourself very limited later on. Here we have a big old scoring wheel and turn sort of tracker. This along here will have random objectives for each turn. We'll get those tokens out in a bit. So here you've got the overall victory point for the end of the game. These will be 2 random conditions where we'll be judged on for victory points. And then also you've got victory points here for the research tracks and victory points here for resources you have at the end. These 2 tracks are used in the Automata solo version of the game. So maybe I'll explain that in another video. You'll also notice around the outside here are all of the planets. And this kind of, although Transdim and Gaia are not really included, guys, here in the middle, but the point is that if you're terraforming any of these worlds into the others, this is the order in which they go. So, for example, to terraform this swamp planet into this Terran planet, you'll need to take 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. Whereas if you want to turn this oxide planet into a Terra planet, then it's just 1. Perfect. Then I've got loads of little baggies. These are Gaia planets. Gaia planets are another planet type in the game. Transdim planets turn into these Gaia planets. What's a transdim planet, you ask? Well, a transdim planet looks like that. Yep, that's right. It's a planet type we haven't really seen before. We've got lots of other planet types here. Oxide, swamp, volcanic, titanium up here. That's ice and desert right next to each other, weirdly. And a transdim planet, and if you transform it with a Gaia former, it becomes a Gaia planet. And you can live on it. That's cool. Can't live on a transdim planet. It's got to be Gaia-ified. Hence Gaia Project, I suppose. But these will be going down on the board when those transdim planets are transformed. Essential bits and bobs here. Oh, we've got a first player token here. That goes to the first player. We've got here a card that allows us to randomize turn order. That's in the advanced rules. But it just determines who passes first each round and their turn order in the next round. We've got this, which is a shortcut card for planets to be terraformed. So you can see here that for the desert planet, Terran and Ice are the hardest to terraform. You'll also notice that Gaia and Transdim are on here for 1 and 2 steps for all of these planets. And here are the rest on the other side. So that's useful, but you only get one of those. And then you've got 4 of these player shortcuts. And these have, they're double-sided, but it's the same on both sides. And they've got all of the actions listed on them that you can do in a turn. So more on that when we get to actions and what players do on their turn. Oh, yeah. This is the Lost Planet token. Don't worry about the Lost Planet token. This comes out when someone reaches the final stage of the research track. See, where is it? Boom, here we go. When you get to stage 5 and you've done full research, not only do you have range 4, but you discover a lost planet. That lets you put this token down somewhere on the board and you can stick a mine on it. Yeah. We have research tokens. So many research tokens. And there's a whole different bunch of types of them. These will go down on the research board and be unlocked when you build certain buildings. And when you take them, you can advance in research levels in appropriate columns. That's great. And they give you all kinds of neat things. Like these make it easier to found foundations. And these let you gain charge up power on your turn. And these ones just give you resource income every turn you get a knowledge and an income. That's great. This one just gives you a one-off of an ore and a QIC. That's a quantum intelligence cube. That's great. So I will explain how these work later on. But they are technology, research technology tiles. Wow, these are advanced technologies. Now, despite there being a whole load of them, there's only actually going to be 6 randomly selected in the game to be in the game. And you get these when you max out one of those research columns, which means that only one person is going to be able to attain each tile. We'll pick 6 of these, 1 for each column, randomly determined at the start. Whoa! These are the random objectives. These are going to go out on that objective board I showed you. Remember this bit here? Well, these will go out here, and these determine different victory conditions at the end. For example, in this game, players are going to get 18 victory points if they colonize the most different sectors of space. Sectors of space, well, that's a whole board like this. One of these. Get it? That's what that thing is. So if you get on the most of them, you're going to get 18 points. And this is if you colonize the most Gaia planets, you're going to get 18 points. If you and somebody else draw, say you both have 4 Gaia planets, then you'll each get 15, because that's 18 plus 12 divided by 2. And the last place person, he gets 6. And if there's a 4th player, and they're the worst, then they get nothing. So there's a whole bunch of different ones of those, but you'll only ever use 2 of them. There's 6 of them, so that's replayability, man. Next up, we got Federation tokens, and these are going to be put out when you form a Federation, and they give you different rewards based on which ones you take. Note that this one here is special and unique. It belongs to a race called the Glean, and doesn't go in the pool with the others. There should be 3 of each type, and you should have 6 different types. Note that the 12 victory points doesn't have a green side. Don't worry about that. That's just simply because these are going to be flipped over. And this is to show that this one doesn't have that ability. It can't be flipped. We've got here random victory conditions. You'll pick 6 of these per game, 1 for each round. You'll lay them out on that planet board we saw earlier. See this planet board here? Here is the turn track. And you'll just lay these randomly out at the beginning of the game. And these are going to determine your random objectives over the course of the game. These numbers along the top here with the green light, those are for when you're playing with the Altima. That's in the 1-player mode. And this down here, this shows you what the victory point condition is. For example, this denotes that on this turn, every player, when they put a mine on a Gaia planet, will gain 4 victory points. Every trading station you put down on the turn will net you 3 victory points. Or this one, every time you spend a terraforming point to Terraformer Planet, you gain 2 victory points. Awesome. These are called turn boosters, and they give you extra actions and resources that you'll gain on your turn. And the first person to pass each round gets their sort of choice, their first choice of turn booster. So these can be really powerful bonuses. This one, for example, gives you 2 victory points for every trade building you have, plus 1 when you return it at the end of the round. 2 victory points for every trade building you have when you return it at the end of the round. That's what this symbol means here. And this just means the hand means income. So this means at the beginning of your turn that you have this, you'll gain 1 ore as well. What's ore? Well, let's look at the currencies. Oh boy, here are the currencies in Terra Mystica. We've got quantum interface cubes. Quantum intelligence cubes. That's what these are called. And they look like that. And what are they? They're things you spend to get bonuses. We've got knowledge. Knowledge is a resource that you spend to gain research. And these are knowledge trackers, and they'll track your knowledge on your board. Here we've got power tokens. These power tokens move around power charging bowls, giving you power, and you can spend these tokens in 2 different kinds of ways. You can both spend them when they're fully charged, reducing their charge in exchange for powerful other resources and powerful abilities, or you can remove them from your player board entirely, allowing you to do even more interesting things. Furthermore, they help you power your Gaia former. Power tokens, essential. Here we've got these ore trackers. Whoo, ore trackers. There we go. These will track how much ore you've got, and don't they just look like ore? Then we've got these golden discs. What are these? Well, of course, these are futuristic money. These are credit trackers. These will track how many credits you've got on your board. Brilliant. Is there anything more? Yes, there's more. More stuff. These are record tokens. Record tokens keep track of federations. Federations are sets of buildings that form powerful alliances and get you these wonderful tokens, which are worth victory points and sometimes get you other things. And these are just put down on the board to denote where the federations are, so you don't lose track of them. Good job, record tokens. We've got these marker tokens. All these do is show when you've used an action on the board. Behold, actions on the board. Behold, marker token indicates this action has been taken and cannot be taken anymore. Good job. Thanks, marker token. Finally, we've got assorted races things. These are the Taclon's brain crystal, and these, I believe, belong to a race called the Ivrits. I'll probably just edit in the correct name here. I can't remember their space stations. It looks like I've managed to make a right mess of the table with all these components and things. So why don't I put all of these, tidy these up, put some of them away, and I will show you how to set up the board for Gaia Project. So, before I get to setting up space and the 10 space tiles and explaining how that works, I'm just going to set up some of the board admin. Unfortunately, we do have a bit of admin to do here. The first thing we've got to do, I guess, the first thing we can do is establish our primary victory conditions. So, as you may recall, these are the primary victory conditions for the game, and we'll pick 2 of them at random to set out here on this board. We've got our victory board, and I'm just going to pick 2 of these random tokens, or 2 of these victory condition tokens to put out on our board here. Wow. So we're going to have this one. This is going to award you victory points for colonizing the most different kinds of planets over the course of the game. And we've got this one. This awards points to the person who builds the most satellites. Where's our satellites? Well, we'll have a look at satellites a bit more when we set up our player boards and I get all the player pieces out. What we're also going to do as part of this step is choose our victory conditions for each of our turns. Now remember, there are 6 turns over the course of the game, and the winner has the most points at the end of the 6 turns, and each of the turns will have a random victory condition selected. So for turn 1, we've got placements of mines, 2 victory points. For turn 2, the placement of a research station or planetary interstellar thingy. Oh, look at that. It's the exact same one. Then we've got placement of trade buildings. Then we've got further placement of trade buildings, but for slightly less points. And finally, the terraforming of other planets. Probably not the most convenient order for our players here. So we've determined now our random assortment of tiles here. Don't worry about this. This only comes into the automata play. So now it's time to randomize our research board. So if we take a quick look at the science tiles, here we've got the 9 different technologies available in the game. There's 3 in each stack, but there's a total of 4 because there's also a stack of these ones with green dots on the back. Note that these ones don't have green dots. That's because the green dots help you just to pick out one of each. So now that I've got one of each here, I can shuffle these up and randomly place them out on the research board. So these techs are going to be intrinsically linked with our 6 research columns here. I've got my Lost Planet token up there as well. And we'll just randomly put these out. So that one gives you power, or an action to gain power. This one gives you income, power, and ore. This one gives you a one-off ore and QIC. Here we've got knowledge and credit income. This one's just straight up worth 7 victory points when you get it. Here we've got one that gives you knowledge every time you colonize a planet. A new kind of planet, I should say. This one's worth 4 credits. This one makes your Interstellar Foundation and your research facility worth more points. And finally, this one gives you victory points every time you put a mine on a Gaia planet. And now we just take the stacks that we assembled earlier and top these off so that there's 4 of each technology available over the course of the game. And the placement of these technologies in these different slots is very important because whenever you gain a technology, which you do every time you build a science facility or research facility, you gain a technology. You can choose any one of these technologies that you want, but if you pick one of these ones at the bottom, you can move your research on in any one of the 6 columns. But if you take one from the top row here, then you move yourself on in the research level of that particular column. So these ones are tied in, whereas these ones are wild. So that's our science technology set up there, or our basic technology set up there. But now we've got our advanced technologies coming in. Remember these guys? These are better technologies. They show you've assembled you've researched better. These are iPhone 1s and these are iPhone 10s. But these are randomized also, and these aren't acquired the same way. These are acquired through excelling at research. So just flip those face down, and then pick 6 at random to place along the top of the board like this. Yeah. Advanced research. And once you get the hang of this iconography, it's fairly simple actually. But I'll probably go into a bit more detail of the iconography in a bit. When you max out the terraforming chart, you gain 1 Federation token as well. So at the beginning of the game, you are instructed to randomly assign 1 terraforming token to this space. There it is. Finally, as we discussed earlier, you select at random a number of these round boost tokens, 1 for each player plus 3. So if we were playing a 3-player game, we would put out 6. Perfect. The rest go back in the box, along with the unused advanced technology, the unused victory conditions, and the unused turn victory point bonuses. All back in the box. I got my victory points all sorted out. I got my research track sorted out. I got my player boost round token doodads sorted out. I've got to set up the player boards. I've got 3 player boards here for a 3-player game. But first I'm going to show you how the map looks in a 2-player, 3-player, and 4-player game. So here you've got the board for a 2-player game. This is the starter version of the 2-player game, which is why there's already mines out on it. You've got... in the 2-player game, the 2 races that I can't pronounce, the Halas and Xenos. And they will start on these buildings as per laid out. Now, when you get to the advanced rules of the game, not only can you elect to put in or take out more or fewer tiles, but you can also elect to randomize your starting locations as well. But for the starting the players who are playing for the first time, it's recommended that you use this board layout and you also start with your mines down on these particular planets. It's worth noting, this is sort of the main distinction between all these different board setups, is that on this particular one, 5, 6, and 7 tiles are on their empty side up, which looks like this, whereas the other tiles are on their solid side up. These tiles don't actually have an alternate side, but these tiles do. You see there's the solid side and the hollow side. We don't use tiles 8, 9, and 10 for the 2-player map. If you've set up your 2-player map, it's actually fairly simple to set up the 3-player map. All you do is flip over these 3 tiles from their hollow side to their solid side, and then take out your 8, 9, and 10 and just place them along the outside like this. 10, 9, and 8 down here. All of the arrows are pointing the same way consistently. So now I'm just going to put out some player pieces. And there we have it. It is set up for 3 players, the learning map. And I've got our 3 starter races out here because I'm going to be using them in the examples of sort of turn order and stuff when I talk about that. But I've got our blue Terran, and they start on these 2 sectors here, 1 and 3, on the blue Terra planets. We've got our Tacklons, who are our space bugs, and they like the swamp planets, and they start here on sector 6 and 1. And we've got our Geodins, who are very good at colonizing planets that don't really support them. And they've got 2 here on the volcanic planets in sectors 2 and 1. And the 4-player map is actually very easy to set up because the map remains exactly the same, and we just add another player board. So now we've got our 4-player board set up. Like I said, the board, the layout of the tiles is actually exactly the same as the 3-player layout, but you'll notice that our Geodins have become Xenos, and we've added the Hajj Halas. Seriously, someone help me with that. What is that? Hajj Halas? Hajj Halas? Is it the same? Are the names the same in German? Anyway, not the point. The point is you start on these planets here. So the Xenos are in sectors 1, 5, and 3. They get an extra mine because they are the Xenos, and that's their thing. The Hajj Halas are in sectors 1 and 2. You've got the Tacklons in sectors 2 and 6, and the Terrans in sectors 10 and 3. Note that most of the starting planets have changed from the 3-player version, so keep an eye on that. But I'm going to set the 3-player version back up, and then I'm going to show you how to set up one of these player boards. Okay, good. So let's go through what is in this bag. So here we've got the Terran board, and here we've got all the different things the player who plays Terran will need to play the game. Now, it's a very specific number, so let's take a look at these buildings laid out on the board. You're going to have 3 research stations, which go down here on this research track. You've got 2 academies, which go down here on this track. And watch these little white lines down here. They're kind of hard to see, but they show sort of a build order. The Planetary Institute goes down here on the top of the board like this. And then we've got our mines and our trade buildings, which are laid out like this. Now, this is really important because as you remove buildings from this board, you're going to reveal all of these resource icons, which we can see now because there are no buildings, but will vanish as we put the buildings down on top of them. When those icons are later revealed, you'll get that income. And so in a way, and so this indicates how you earn income for building buildings. But bear in mind that when you upgrade buildings and return them to your board, then you will inevitably lose those resources that you were once gaining. But you'll gain a different resource as you've replaced that building with something else. So we should have... Now, there are slots for all 8 mines here, but you start with 2 of them on the board. So these 2 are going to go out on the board. However, they can come back to your player board later, which is why there are slots for them here. So I'm just putting those mines back out on the board where they belong, back to the player board. These are Gaia formers. You don't start with any unless you happen to be the Terrans, which this race is, in which case you start with 1. Gaia formers are placed here on your player board. It is possible as you research Gaia Project in the research area to gain up to 3 of these Gaia formers, but most races start with 0, except the Terrans, who start with 1. We've also got 7 of these player tokens, or point obelisks, and these are going to track various things on your board. None of them actually here on the player board, but around the table. So we'll look at setting these out in just a minute. But one other thing we've got are 25 of these satellites. These satellites are used later on to indicate federations, and they're not really needed right now. So just hang on to those near your player board for when the time is right. So later on, we'll go through what happens on a player's turn and the different actions they can take. But one of those actions is to upgrade buildings. And you can see here from the player board that the mine becomes the trade building, becomes the Planetary Institute. However, you're limited by the number of things on your board, which means that you can only build 1 Planetary Institute. However, the trade building also becomes the research station, and the research station becomes the Academy. And the Academies actually have disparate bonuses underneath, and you can choose which of the 2 academies you want to build when you have the opportunity to build it. Something else we're going to do that's important is put out these tokens. These are actually resource tokens, as we looked at earlier, but these are used for tracking resources. They aren't actually resources themselves. And they're used here on this slider along the top of your player board to track your resources. And everyone's got starting positions for all of their tokens, but there is something very important which I'll point out right now. So if you have a look here, you've got the starting positions for 3 of the 4 tokens you begin with, and that's 0 for the credits, 3 for the knowledge, and 4 for the ore. However, if we travel up here, we can see that there's a second credit token up here on the 15 mark, which shows that we actually start with 15 credits, because we've got one on the 15 and one on the 0. But the important thing that this indicates, which is not super intuitive, is that actually this means you can have a maximum of 30 credits in the game when both of your tokens reach there. However, once you reach that point, you do not get another credit token and start tracking your credits. You are simply maxed out. And if you're following, that also means that that's right. The maximum amount of ore and knowledge you can have at any given time is 15. Once your tokens reach the 15 mark, then they're maxed out and you've got to spend some of them. But for now, we'll just put these in their starting positions, 15 credits, 3 knowledge, and 4 ore. Now I'm going to put out these player tokens. The first player token goes here on the 10 spot for victory points. Everybody starts with 10 victory points because you can lose them. You can spend victory points later on, and we'll explain what that is at a later stage. We also get 1 on each research tracker. There we go, and that is all of my player columns out. But, perchance, do we start with any research? The humans actually have this symbol right here, and this symbol here actually says 1 of these, and this symbol is actually the Gaia Project. Remember how they start with a Gaia former? That's because they start at level 1, Gaia Project. So we'll put our humans on level 1 of the Gaia Project. Boom. See, there's our Gaia former right there. Also this means, we'll talk more about this later. But if there are any other bonuses in there, the humans would also get that at this time. If we take a look at our Geodens board, we can see they start with 1 in the Terraforming research track. That's the Terraforming Research track there. And if we have a look at our Taclons here, we can see that they don't start with any research. They are researchless at the start of the game. So I'll just quickly set up the player boards for these 2 other players as well. So we're more or less ready to go. I've just got to set up a few final touches to some of these player boards. Specifically, we've got to do power tokens and we've got to do QICs. If you look here, this is the power token bowls of power. and your power tokens will move around these bowls, but for now let's just set up our power tokens, and you can see what everyone starts with by looking here and looking here. So the Terran start with 4 power tokens in bowl 1 and 4 power tokens in bowl 2. This is more than your average race. We can see over here by contrast, the Geodens start with 4 in bowl 2 and 2 in bowl 1. If we have a look over here at the Taclons, we can see that it's the same as the Geodens. The Taclons also start... Get out of here, satellite. The Taclons also start with a brain gem, brain jewel, brain crystal in bowl 1 as well. And what is the brain crystal? The brain crystal is worth 3 power charge. It's like a superpower token. Awesome. Now the final thing to do for setup is that if a race has this little symbol here on the bottom of their race board, it just means that they start the game with a QIC as well. So here we go, Terrans have a QIC. In fact, everybody gets a QIC. 1 QIC for the Geodens and also 1 QIC for the Taclons as well. So everybody's got their QIC. One last thing to do, the Geodens are actually on rank 1 of the Terraforming Research track because that is their jam. But let's have a closer look at that space. If we have a look at the first space on the Terraforming track here that the Geodens start on, you can see that there is a 2 ore with a white outline and a white gem here. So that indicates that they get this bonus 1 time. Now, because they started there, they automatically begin the game with it. So we come over here to the Geoden player board and we give them 2 ore. Speaking of white outlines with stars, it's probably about time we had a quick look at the iconography in the game. There's really not, or rather the iconography in terms of resources and when you gain them. Each round in Gaia Project is divided into several phases. It starts with the income phase, then the Gaia phase, then the player action phase, and finally the cleanup phase. These 4 phases take place every round for 6 rounds, and then the game ends, and the player with the most victory points is declared the winner. Every time you gain income, you gain the resources that you gain during the income step. But how do you know what resources you gain during the income step? Well, it's very simple. There's a hand icon under the resource. Let me show you. Just on the Terran player board here, we can see that in the income step, the Terran is going to get 3 ore and 1 knowledge. We know that because it shows the resource and the hand symbol below it. If the Terran built a trade building, we can see now they will also get 3 credits in addition to that. If they built their Planetary Institute, then we can see that they actually gain 4 power charge and 1 power token. Well, what does that mean? Well, let me go in. I'll explain how power charge works a bit later once I've done this iconography. But you can clearly see the hand symbols here indicating that they gain this in the income step. But what about things that we gain at other times? Well, the next most important piece of iconography is that white outline with the star I spoke to you about. If we have a look here at the 5th spaces at the economy and science tracks here on the research board, we can see that these top rewards here are indicated by the white outline and star, and that just means that they're one-offs. Basically, when you achieve this rank, you gain this 1 time, or you gain this 1 time. The outline of the white sort of glow with the white star, that indicates that this is a one-off bonus and not something that's gained every time during the income step. See, we can see here the hands and here the white outline. The resources with the income symbol are only gained during the income step and not at any other time. There are also some other icons that indicate sort of trigger timing. I'll just show you that really quickly as well. Don't worry, it's not nearly as complicated as it sounds. Remember earlier when we looked at this player marker, and this indicates that this effect triggers when the marker is returned to the supply or laid down. So that's the red one like that. But we've also got, so if you have a look here, there's this white sort of bracket here, similar to our red bracket from earlier, but not quite the same. This indicates that this triggers once when you gain this tile. So the white bracket just indicates a sort of a one-off effect. And in this case, it would be to give you one knowledge resource for every different planet type that you had colonized. And you can see here from the white border and the star that this is sort of a one-time gain. So you just total up your different planets there and gain one knowledge for each one. One time when you gain this technology. By contrast, the green bracket is much friendlier. This indicates that this happens every time the criteria are met. So in this case, every time you put a mine down on a Gaia planet, gain 3 victory points. And this will go on, continuing to affect you forever. But it's worth noting that you can't have 2 of the same technology. I'll also mention really quickly that these orange borders, orange hexes here, they are special actions, and they can be taken on your turn in lieu of a standard action. And, they give you, there's different ways to sort of unlock these special actions. But there's some here on the player. Turn boosts here. There's a special action here on one of these technologies as well. So now that we're all set up and everything's looking good, I guess we're ready to actually start playing the game. So how does that happen? Well, the very first thing we need to do is decide who's going to be the first player. And I guess that's going to be me, because I'm actually the only one here. But you can determine that however you want, randomly, or by any other means. But once you've got the first player locked in, the player to the right will take a player boost of their choice, whichever one they want. They can have first choice. Then the next player will take a choice. And then the last, the player going first has the last choice of the player boost. And once that's done, these other 3 will continue to sort of live there and form the pool of potential boosts for the rest of the game. But now that we've done that, we're actually ready to go straight into the income step for turn 1. So, in the income step, this is all simultaneous. Every player would count up their available income. I believe it is more or less the same for everyone, except for the modifications on the player boosts. So, for example, in this case, the Terran player has 3 ore coming in, 1 knowledge coming in, as well as an additional knowledge and an additional ore. So the Terran player just counts that up. They go 4 ore, puts them on 8, and 2 knowledge puts them on 5. They don't have any credits coming in, so that's where they end up. Our Taclons here, they get 3 ore and 1 knowledge, but they also gain 2 credits. Nice. And finally, our Geodens, they gain their ore. Now they're already on 6 because they got 2 bonus ore from their path, their terraforming path. But they go up to 9 ore then, they go up to 4 knowledge, and they've got 2 power. Well, what does that mean? Let's have a look now at how power works. Whenever you see this symbol here on the bottom of this player boost, that means you gain power. You can tell you gain power because the purple arrow is pointing towards the right and also is colored in. We can see here on all of these actions that you can spend power to take these actions. And we can tell it's spending power because the arrow is now hollow, it's not colored in, and it's also pointing to the left. So that's what spending power looks like. Here are the bowls of power. And in order to spend power, power must be here in the 3rd quadrant. How do we get power there? Well, when we gain power, power moves up through the 3 bowls. That's what this indicates here. Gaining power, power moves from bowl 1 to bowl 2. Gaining power, it moves from 2 to 3. Spending power, our hollow arrow, moves back into bowl 1. So how do we gain power? Well, we've just gained 2 power. So when you gain power, you must move power from the bottommost bowl into the next bowl. So in this case, we would simply do that. Let's say this was our situation and we gained 4 power. We would take 2 up to here and then 2 more over to here. Now, if we spent these 2 power to do something, we would then have to get them back into bowl 2 again before we can start putting more into bowl 3. So the longer we wait to spend the power, the more likely we are, the easier it's going to be for us to stockpile power in bowl 3 and get more powerful abilities with it. You may have noticed as well this little icon here. Well, this means that at any point, if you want, you can remove one of your power from your board completely to knock a power out of bowl 2 into bowl 3. So for everyone you delete, you get to bounce one into bowl 3. But it's not a very efficient way of doing it, and these are removed from the board and returned to the stock. Sometimes, for example, when you build your Planetary Institute, you might notice these symbols. Now, if you remember, this is the income symbol for gain 4 power, which is great. This is the income symbol for gain 1 power into your bowl number 1. So this is how we gain new power over the course of the game. And when this happens, we simply take one of these from the stock and we add it to bowl number 1, thus giving us a new power. Now, what's interesting here is that you can choose the order in which these take place. So if your board looked a bit like this, you might choose to add 4 into bowl 3, thus gaining your 4 power before you add 1 to bowl 1. However, if your board looked like this, you might elect to add the token into bowl 1 first, so then you can go 2, 3, and shoot it up here into bowl 3 as well. So with everyone having gained their income, it's now time for the players to take turns taking actions. The player who's going first will get the first action. There are 8 actions available to the players in the game, so let's have a look at those 8 actions now. Here are the 8 actions available in the game. Action number 1. Terraform a planet. So action number 1 would have you terraform a planet by putting a mine down on it. Cool. How does that work? So, in order to place a mine from your board onto a planet, first off, you have to find a planet that's compatible to your species. For example, if I'm Terran, I want to go here onto the other Terra planets. They are comfortable for me. And in order to do that, I simply pay the cost of a mine and I can put it down. But before I can even do that, I have to check to see if it's in range. Holy crap, what is range? Range is something you get here on the navigation research board. Every one of us starts here on the first square, which means we all actually start with range 1. But as we progress up this board, we can unlock range 2 and eventually range 3 and 4 when we get to the top. And we all start with range 1. Well, what is range 1? Range 1 means within 1 space of your planet. So in this case, the only planet in range of the Terran settlement, the Terran mine here, is this swamp planet. This also means that the Terrans can't be willy-nilly throwing down mines here and here. Those are way out of range. So how do we improve range? Well, one thing you can do if you want to send a colony off across space is you can actually spend one of your QICs to increase your range by 2. So at the start of the game, if I wanted to reach a more inaccessible planet, like let's say, for example, I wanted to launch a mine down to this planet here, I could spend a QIC, which would give me a range of 3. So my normal range of 1 would go up to range 2 and range 3, which would allow me to reach the planet. At which point I pay the cost of the mine and put the mine down. What's the cost of the mine? Well, let's have a quick look at that. The costs of all the buildings are here on your player board. Right here is the cost of the mine. The mine costs 2 credits and 1 ore. So if I were to build that mine, so if I was going to pay the cost of the mine, I would come up to my resource tracker here. I'd spend 2 ore and 1 credit. You may have noticed that the trade building has a different cost here. I'll explain that in a minute. But let's say I don't want to spend my QIC. Let's say I just want to build somewhere, within range 1. Just expand my empire a little bit and save this for maybe more important things later on. Like, for example, colonizing Gaia planets, which I need it for. Or taking one of these 3 sort of special green actions here, which I also need it for. But in this case, I'm going to put down my mine here on this desert planet. So before I do anything else, well, I'm in range. That's fine. I can do that. But now I need to terraform the desert planet into a Terra planet. Well, how do I do that? Well, unfortunately, it's not actually great for me because the desert planet is miles away from the Terra planet on the chart. Let's have a look at the shortcut real quick. Here's our Terra planet here. There's our desert planet there. Well, damn, that's the furthest away it could be, which means it's going to cost 3 terraforming points to make this planet habitable for these people. What are terraforming points? Well, these are sort of things that you need to pay in order to terraform a planet. When you're terraforming a planet, you just you pay the cost and then you're done. It's done. You must terraform the entire planet all at once. You can't move around steps. So if you want to, the only way to tell when a planet's been terraformed by someone else is that their building exists on it, which means you have to build the building as well. So first you have to work out your range, then you have to work out the terraforming cost. You need to pay that cost, and then you immediately pay the cost of a mine. And that's all one action. What is the terraforming cost? Well, in this case, I've got to terraform this desert planet in order to put my mine down. So let's go and see the Terraforming Research Bar. Much like the range aspect on the navigation research bar, this research bar comes with improvements to terraforming as you progress down it. For example, here we're all still on level 3, even though orange player, the Geodins here is one further on than the Terrans and the Taklons. They're all still here on the first step of terraforming, which means it costs 3 ore per terraforming step. You can see that when you reach level 2 research here, the cost decreases to 2 ore per step, and when you reach level 3, it decreases to 1 ore per step. So I've got to go 3 terraforming steps to make this desert planet into a Terran planet. 3 steps, 3 ore per step, that's 9 ore. 9 ore? I only have 8. I can't build my mine there. Furthermore, anyway, the mine costs another ore. So I need 10 ore total to do that. There must be some way I can get terraforming steps without paying all this ore. There is, although they're not really available to me yet. I can take either of these 2 actions. These will give me terraforming steps. When I take these actions, I immediately carry out a terraforming mine building action. And that's because terraforming steps, terraforming sort of step bonuses, are not accumulative, which means that you can't save them. You must spend them the minute you get them, and the only thing to spend them on is converting a planet to a hospitable planet, and the only way you can do that is by doing it in its entirety, which means you basically better have the entire cost of the whole project ready to go up front, or the whole action's pretty much wasted. In fact, it is wasted. So you can do one of these 2 actions. This will get you 2 terraforming steps for the cost of 5 power. That means 5 power from bowl 3 into bowl 1 to do that. Over here we can do 1 terraforming step for the cost of 3 power. Note that if you were to take one of these 2 actions here, you could actually make up the rest of the terraforming steps with ore if you needed them. We've also got a terraforming step over here as a special action on this round booster that the Taklons took at the beginning of the round. So they can get 1 terraforming step for free that way. Again, when they take this action, they must immediately then build a mine with the terraforming step that they've acquired, and they can pay any additional terraforming steps they need with ore. However, they cannot combine that ability with one of these abilities. These are 2 separate actions and must be completed in their entirety separately. So let's just have a quick look at a Terran colonizing a planet. In this case, he throws the mine out there onto the Titanium planet. The Titanium planet is 2 steps away from a Terran planet on the planetary chart, which means that costs 6 ore, plus 1 ore for the mine, and 2 credits for the mine, making a grand total cost here of 1 QIC to boost the range, 7 ore for the terraforming steps and the mine, and 2 credits for the mine as well. Very hefty price to pay just to shoot a mine out over there. Let's have a look at the next action. So the next action available is convert a transdim planet. Convert a transdim planet. What the hell is that? Converting a transdim planet means taking one of these purple transdim planets here and turning them into a nice fertile green Gaia planet. And the only way to do that is with one of our Gaia formers. So we take this action, we put the Gaia former down on the transdim planet. We must now do 2 costs. The first cost is the payment of power stones. Now this works a bit differently to when you're paying sort of power for, say, these actions, or basically when you're paying for this symbol here with the black arrow that we looked at earlier. Instead, when you're paying for a Gaia former, you've actually got to take the cost of the action, which we can see here on the Gaia Project track. So here we've got our track for the Gaia Project. As you progress down here in research, you will unlock additional Gaia formers. Furthermore, you decrease the cost in power tokens that you need to carry out the Gaia former action. At level 1, you get 1 Gaia former and you pay 6 tokens. And then at level 3 here, you get another Gaia former and the price goes down to 4. And at step 4, it's another Gaia former, price goes down to 3. And at step 5, well, that's just a bonus step. Step 5 just gets you victory points. So, 6 power tokens. That means I need to put 6 power tokens into my Gaia pool here. When you're paying for a Gaia former to go down on a transdim planet, you pay 6 power tokens or whatever you need to based on your position on the Gaia Project track, and you can take them from any of the 3 bowls. So it is advisable to take them from the bowl in which you have the lowest number of tokens. So in this instance, if I was going to pay 6, I would take 4, put them in here, 2 more from here, and put them in there. Now I've paid 6, and I put them in here because they go into the bowl, the green bowl, because this is part of a Gaia Project action. And it sort of exists outside of the circumnavigation of the power charge. Note that part of the Terrans' special race ability is that this arrow connects to bowl 2. Every other race connects to bowl 1. See? Tragic. So I've paid my 6 power. I've put down my Gaia former. Is that it? No, that's not it. Because I also need to pay a terraforming cost. That's right. If you have a look here on our terraforming cheat sheet, you can see that transdim planets exist here in step 2, which means that you need to pay for 2 terraforming steps in order to do this. Note that Gaia planets also exist here in the 1-step bracket. So if I'm going to throw down that Gaia former there, I need to pay my terraforming step cost, in this case 6 ore, based on the terraforming research track and the number of steps I have to take. So if I paid 6 ore, I could put my Gaia former down there on the transdim planet. Now, note that 2 things sort of happens here. 1, I cannot count that planet yet as a starting point for my race. So that means I can't expand from that planet with just a Gaia former on it. In order to expand outwards from a planet, I need to have a mine on it. Secondly, I can do nothing further with that planet this round. Next round, I will be able to colonize it with a mine, and I'll explain how colonizing Gaia planets works next. But I cannot colonize it with a mine the same turn I placed the Gaia former. I'll have to do that next turn. Even if I have the resources to do it, it doesn't become a Gaia planet until the following turn, or the following round. So, let's say I've done that last turn. Now I'm ready to colonize a Gaia planet. How does that work? Well, colonizing a Gaia planet without a Gaia former, that is to say the ones that exist already on the board, is much like colonizing any planet that's 1 step away from your homeworld type, with 1 exception. You go through the process as normal, paying the terraforming cost, paying the cost of the mine in order to place it. Remember, the terraforming cost for Gaia planets for every race is 1 step, so 3 ore most of the time, or 2 or 1 ore depending how advanced you are on the terraforming research track. But the catch is that in order to colonize a Gaia planet, you must also spend a QIC. One of these bad boys. So you need to discard this, pay the terraforming cost, and then pay the cost of the mine, and you can stick a mine down on a Gaia planet, provided it's in range. However, if you have come via the QIC route, that is to say, for example, here we see the QIC that my Terrans placed earlier. Well, this turn, that will be replaced with a Gaia planet, and because they've got their Gaia former on there, they can actually put down a mine for just the cost of the mine. They don't have to pay the QIC because they've got a Gaia Former on it. It's worth noting as well that when a Gaia Former is on a transdim planet, that planet, even though it doesn't count as colonized for the race that's put down the Gaia Former, it does count as reserved for them, which means that nobody can go in there and take that away from you by building their own mines or whatever. And nobody else can put down a Gaia Former. So you've put yours down, and the next turn you get to have your mine. How do I get this power back out of my green shell? When does that happen? That happens in the step after income, the Gaia phase. But we're currently in the action phase, so I'll explain how the Gaia phase works a bit later. So the advantage of putting down a Gaia planet under a Gaia Former, rather than colonizing a Gaia planet directly, is that you don't have to pay the QIC cost. You can put down your mine there for the cost of the mine, but you must remember that the Gaia form will go away when you put the mine down, and you pay 1 ore and 2 credits for that, but you must also pay the terraforming step cost. Remember, Gaia planets have a terraforming step of 1, so if you put the mine down there, you must pay that cost 3, 2, or 1 ore, depending on what it is. But you don't have to pay the QIC that you have to pay when you're colonizing a Gaia planet directly, provided it was a Gaia planet you converted from a transdimensional planet. The next action on our action chart is upgrade a building. Upgrading buildings is really easy. Mines become trading buildings. Trade buildings either turn into a planetary institute or a research lab, and then a research lab can become an academy. Remember, you can pick either academy you want to put these down. Every other building has to be taken off left to right, but not the academies. The academies can be taken off in either order. That's what this weird white circle is trying to indicate. And you might want to have this special action to gain a QIC, or you might want to have this special income of 2 knowledge per turn, which is really, really good. You also get knowledge every turn from building these research stations. A important part of upgrading, you must upgrade in order, and when you upgrade, you pay this cost here. Now you'll notice that all of them have pretty self-explanatory costs, except for the trade building. Why does this have 2 costs? Why are there 2 prices for the trade building? Well, let's find out. The Terran player wants to build one of their trade buildings here on the board. Now, the trade building we know costs 6 credits and 2 ore, or 3 credits and 2 ore. Why is there a difference in the credit value? Well, because it's a trade post. It needs to be near people to trade with. So if you're over here by yourself in the middle of space and there's no one around you, then it's going to be more expensive to build the trade post. So you got to pay 6 and 2 ore. Whereas if you build over here by your friendly interstellar neighbors, then it costs less because there's someone to trade with. There's revenue coming in, so you're making money already. So that's going to cost 3 credits and 2 ore. Now, how close is too close? How close is close enough? When you're building a trade post and you're checking to see whether or not you're going to get a good deal, you count 2 spaces, or range 2. So in this case, 1, 2, I'm good. In this case, 1, 2, I'm bad. It's not good enough. Now, when I do build a building like this, and it doesn't matter whether it's the trade post or the Planetary Institute that the trade post is being upgraded into, or perhaps I upgraded the trade post into a research station instead. Whenever I put down a building within range 2 of one of my opponent's buildings, they can do what's called a passive charge. And I'll explain passive charge in just a minute. But as the person upgrading the building, it's my responsibility to make sure I say to all of the players for whom this is relevant. For example, if I built a trade building here, I would say to both of my opponents, hey, does anyone want to do a passive power charge? When I do upgrade one of my mines, it returns here to my player board, and thus shifting my economy, because these are covering up those ore incomes that they were once bringing in. But now that I've got my Planetary Institute out and my research station, I'm getting a different kind of income. And managing these incomes over the course of the game is key to success. It's true. You'll notice that all of the buildings have a power charge underneath them. 3 for the Academies and the Planetary Institute, 2 for the trade buildings and the research lab, and 1 for the mines. Well, what do these mean? Those power costs on the buildings are actually really important because they're going to be used later to determine whether you can build a federation. Remember those federation tokens we looked at? Those are your rewards for building a federation. But I'll talk about that when I get to the end of this action step, because it's important first to know how buildings come onto the board and are upgraded. And in this case, those power values for the buildings also come into effect for something called passive charging. When I put down a building, such as my Planetary Institute there, that's in range of my opponent's buildings, like I said, I have to remind them that they can do passive charging, which is when they gain power equal to the power value of that building, they must gain the maximum amount of power they possibly can gain if they choose to gain power. For example, let's look at a couple of different situations here. I've built my Planetary Institute there. So the Taclon could have the option to gain 3 power. They decide they want to gain 3 power. They must gain 3 power because they can. 1, 2, 3. And they're good to go. When you gain power in this way, there's a catch. You can't just gain power every time your opponents build a building. For every power you gain this way, you lose a victory point. So our Taclon friends here are going to go from 10 to 7 because they gained 3 power. By contrast, our Geoden friends here only have the ability to gain 2 power maximum because they've only got 2 power left that can actually increase a step. So what does this mean? This means that they are allowed to gain just 2 power. Like I said, you've got to gain the maximum available to you. And so in this case, they would gain 2 power and they would go down to 8 victory points. Don't forget that when you upgrade a building, the building returns to your board into the leftmost available slot, and that mines turn into trade buildings turn into planetary institutes, trade buildings also turn into research labs, which turn into academies. Every time you build a research lab or an academy, every time you upgrade to a research lab from a trade post or from a research lab to an academy, you get to choose one of these fine technologies here on the research board. You get to choose it and have it, and its effect is applied immediately. Worth noting that every race has a special power tied into their planetary institute, and this special power usually complements the race's ability. Some races don't have abilities, but most of them do. The abilities tied into your planetary institute are typically very good and a cornerstone to winning, so building your planetary institute as soon as possible is almost always advisable. Action number 4. Found a federation. Blue player's got a pretty good little civilization going on over here, and in fact, it looks like he might be ready to found a civilization. You can found a civilization when you have a set of buildings that are in reasonable proximity to each other, although they don't have to be in any specific proximity. More on that later, but the important thing is that they are worth a total of 7 power. Remember the power values from the last action? The ones that affect passive charging? Well, they also affect this. This guy's worth 3, remember, and these 2 are each worth 2. That's a total of 7. And that's great, because 7 is exactly what you need to found a federation. 7 power, or buildings worth a total of 7 power. This can be any combination of buildings. It can be 3 trade buildings and a mine. It can be any sort of situation that you want, really. And the planets don't need to be next to each other or anything like that. However, when you do go to build a federation, you will need to connect the buildings that are separated by space via satellites. Remember these guys? These are your satellites, and they come into play now. So the blue player has taken the federation action, which means he's going to take these 3 buildings, and they're going to form a federation. Now, this is where we'd use our lovely tokens from earlier. These guys to indicate a federation, but these guys can only really indicate a federation when they're on, when the buildings are all on the same planet set. So, if we had a situation like that, we could drop down one of these tokens here to indicate that these 3 are in a federation. Great. However, this guy's all the way over there, which means for a start, he's not even part of the federation yet. So how does he get in? Well, when you decide you want to have a federation, if you need to connect up the buildings through space, you can put down what are called satellites. Satellites have to make the shortest route that they possibly can, which means that in this situation, the satellites would go like that and like that. And now these 3 buildings here form a federation, which is great. And as someone who's just formed a federation, I get to take one of these federation rewards. Perfect. But first I have to pay for my satellites. These 2 satellites require me to remove 2 power from my board forever. It's gone until I replace it somehow. So in this case, I'll take 2 power. Now, note that I can take the power out of bowls 1, 2, or 3, but I can't take the power out of the Gaia bowl. That is separate and off to the side, and that power is inaccessible until the Gaia step releases it from the Gaia bowl. So I built 2 satellites, so I take 2 power from my board, put it back in the supply, and now I'm good to go. If later on I decide to build another building, and it's directly adjacent to a building that's already on the board, it is amalgamated into that federation. Let me show you. The federation is happy and prosperous, so they decide to build another mine. So they build this mine here, and it is now part of the federation because it is adjacent to the federation. Once you're in a federation, you're in a federation for life. So that means that really, if I want to start making another blue federation, I'm going to have to start colonizing other areas of space far away from here, or everything's just going to get sucked into this federation as it grows and expands. Now, note that if you're in a situation where you've got 2 buildings that are available for you to found your federation, like in this case, you would think that blue could make a decision about whether they want to become a federation with this trading post here or this trading building here. However, that's not true, because in order to reach this trade building, blue must put down 3 satellites. But in order to reach this trade building, blue only puts down 2 satellites, which means blue must connect to this building because blue must put down the fewest possible satellites. So, blue has founded a federation. He's got his satellites down on the board. Oh, seem to be missing a trade post there. So, well done, blue. Now blue gets a federation token. He can choose any one of these 6 here and keep it for himself, and he will immediately gain that reward. So let's say blue goes for this one here. That's 7 victory points and 2 ore. Blue immediately takes 2 ore, 1, 2, and 7 victory points, which puts him on 17. There we go. Good job, blue. He's also got this federation token, and it's on its green side, which is really important because that becomes important later when we look at the research board. And more importantly, unlocking these steps on the top of the research board. But you'll note that, as we looked at earlier, the 12 victory point federation token doesn't have a green side, which is important for this later on. The next action is action number 5, and this action has you spending 4 knowledge to advance 1 step on the research ladder. Hey, what do you know? We're back over here on the research board. Now remember, knowledge is that blue thing that's a resource that you can have. Well, you can spend 4 knowledge to take your little power column here, your little player column, and advance it on any one of these sliders. And you can just grab it and advance it. So, boom. 4 knowledge for that. Perhaps you want navigation instead. Or maybe you want economy, just get that economy going in the early game. That's great. You can advance up here all the way to step 4, which is great. Because if you get into these top 3 steps, you get victory points at the end of the game. Superb. But if you want to get up to step 5 and grab these unique bonuses, well, only 1 player can go to step 5. Only 1. And in order to advance to step 5, first you must be able to pay the knowledge cost or otherwise gain a rank in this ladder, possibly by taking the associated tech because you built a research lab or something like that. But you must first attain the step. You must then flip a Federation token from its green side to its gray side. So you must reveal the Federation token, which you've already acquired somehow, and flip it over to its gray side. The token has right now it's basically not doing anything at all anyway, but on its gray side it is no different to its green side, other than the fact that you cannot use it to do this thing again. The gray side simply indicates that it's been exhausted for this purpose, and can't be exhausted again. So, great, you've achieved the top of the tower. Nobody else can come up here. That's yours for good now, and you also gain the associated advanced technology. There it is. Look at that. Good for you. That's yours now. When you gain an advanced tech tile, it covers up a tech tile that you already have. For example, if the Terrans max out on the science tree here, and they gain this research tile here, this advanced technology, covers up one of their existing technologies. Now, in this case, it covers up this one-use-only technology, so it's not a big loss. However, if their only available technology was this one, which gives them income, this would cover that up, and the tile beneath would be lost to them. Being in the top half of any of these research columns is worth 4 victory points at the end of the game per dude in that area. So if you had 3 dudes of level 3, then you would gain 12 victory points at the end of the game. If you had one up here in 4, it would still be the same. Even if he was up here in 5, it would still be the same, 12 victory points. All that matters is that you make it into the top half of the research column. Note the enigmatic science research column here. This one, actually all it does is give you QICs. So as you advance up it, you just keep gaining another QIC or 2 or 4. But, getting to the top still gets you victory points. It still unlocks an advanced tech if you manage to get all the way to the top. So, interesting column here, research. Just gets you QICs. But it's one of the only ways to get QICs. They're quite hard to come by, so that's cool. Our next action number 6, is do a special action. These are the special actions. There are 7 power-based special actions and 3 QIC-based special actions. The special actions can only be taken once per round. So when someone takes a special action, they pay the cost, they get whatever's on it. In most of these cases, it's just going to be resources or more power tokens. But in the case of the 2 terraforming ones, you immediately then do a build, a mine, and terraforming action with the terraforming steps you've just acquired. And when you've fully resolved whatever you took by paying the power cost and gaining the reward, you then cover it up with one of these to show that it can't be used again this round. The same goes for the QICs, except the QIC-based actions, except that instead of paying power, you will pay QICs, and they're slightly more powerful. This one allows you to gain 3 victory points immediately, plus 1 victory point for every different planet type you've colonized. This one allows you to choose one of your Federation tokens, such as this one, and immediately reactivate it, gaining those bonuses again. You must pay the QIC cost at the top, and of course when you've done it, you cover it up to show that it cannot be taken again this round. The next action is different kinds of special actions. That refers to special actions like this one here, which is on the player round bonus boost, round boost. Anyway, this gives you a terraforming step. It can't be used in conjunction with these other ones, but when you take this action, you can cover it up to remind yourself that you've already done it, and then you immediately take a terraform action like number 1, except with 1 free terraform step. Another example of an action you might take for part number 7 is this, which is simply a terraform or a terraform action, except with plus 3 range. So if this was turn 1, you would have range 4 when you took this action instead of range 1. Then you would carry out terraforming and building mines as normal. Our final action that you can take on your turn is pass. So in Gaia Project, you can't just pass to try and wait and see what your opponents are doing. You have to do something, and if you've run out of things to do, either because you don't want to do anything further, or because you've run out of resources and money, then you must pass. And when you pass, you take your player booster here, you put it back in the pool, You pick one of the 3 remaining, not the one you just put back, and then you turn it face down in front of you to indicate that you've passed. If you're not the first player, you also take the first player token. Or, if you're using variable turn order, you slide your turn marker across to the appropriate space on the other side. Blue player passes first. Then the Teclons brown player passes second. And finally, the Geodins orange player passes third. Next round, the turn order will have changed. Instead of the Taclons going last, they will now go second because they passed second. You don't have to use the variable turn order marker. It is an advanced module for the game. If you don't use it, whoever passes first becomes first player, and then turn order just continues around the table as per usual. So players will then just take turns going around in turn order, choosing one of the 7 actions that they want to do, and they'll carry on doing that until they decide they don't want to do any more actions, or until they run out of resources or viable options and they have to stop. In which case they pass, and when everybody is passed, that is to say, if 2 people pass, the other can continue to take actions, or, the round will only end when all players have chosen to pass, so there's no limit to the number of actions you can take beyond what's viable and what you can afford with the resources you have. Then when everybody's passed, it's time for the cleanup step. The cleanup step is very, very easy. You just remove any of the round markers you put down here on the unique actions, so any of these markers are removed. The new player bonus icons you took are flipped face up so that they are now face up for the income step. And you take the tile for the round you're on and you can throw that back in the box, or you can do what we do and just flip it face down to show that you've progressed on to the next round. And that's the cleanup step. Unique abilities. Flip your player boost bonus. Flip the round tile, and you're ready to go back to the income step of the next phase. So let's go back and have a quick look at the enigmatic Gaia step. All that happens in the Gaia step is that all of the power that's become stored in your Gaia pool is released back into pool number 1. Woo! Done. That's it. The Terrans, they function slightly differently because of the special ability of their Planetary Institute, which means that when you put power back, you get to put it into Bowl 2. That's their Terran ability. That's great. But the other thing that happens is that when they do that, they can gain resources equal to the number of power tokens they put back. For example, in this case, I put 6 back into Bowl 2, so I can take up to 6 power worth of these resources here. So you can see here, I could have a QIC and 2 credits. I could have 2 ore. I could have a knowledge and 2 credits. I could have 6 credits. It's up to me how I distribute that. But this is unique to the Terrans only. What's not unique is that resources do have exchange rates. Here are the exchange rates. They're printed on your board for easy reference, alongside the cost to terraform the different planets for your race, and also a reminder about how you terraform Transdim and Gaia planets using the Gaia Former. You need to have a QIC or a Gaia Former on the Gaia planet, and you can put down a Gaia Former on a Transdim planet for the cost of power. But over here you can see a reminder that we can spend a QIC to increase our range by 2. We can also burn 4 power back into Bowl 1 to gain a QIC, 3 power for an ore, 4 power for a knowledge, 1 power for a credit. We can also trade an ore for a credit at any time, or a knowledge for a credit at any time. Furthermore, we can trade an ore to put 1 power token into Bowl 1 of our power bowls. We can also trade a QIC for an ore as well. All of these exchange rates are pretty bad, but you can do them as many times as you want on your turn, so long as you have the resources available to you. You can do it before or after taking any one of the 8 actions on this card. Note that once you've taken action 8 and passed, The only thing left that you can do is that you can still participate in the passive charge. So if someone upgrades a building after you've passed that's next to one of your buildings, and you would have the option to passive charge, and they ask you, would you like to? You can say yes, and you can do that even though you've passed. You give up the victory points and gain the power as normal. So over the course of the game, you're going to be gaining victory points from the 6 different round bonuses that we set out at the beginning. You're going to be gaining victory points from your technologies as you unlock them. You'll be gaining victory points from the advanced technologies. You'll be gaining victory points from your federations as well. So all of these will be ticking up. You could be gaining victory points from this action here, or victory points from these player round boosters as well. There are victory points everywhere to be found on this board. But when you get to endgame scoring, those victory points will no longer be available, but you will be somewhere around the victory point track with all those points you've racked up over the course of the game. And then there's just a few things to tie up before we can determine who has the most victory points and who is the winner of Terra Mystica. Well, during endgame scoring, there are just a few things to add into the victory points that have already been accumulated during the course of the game. You can see here a little reminder that you gain 4 victory points for every one of your tokens that's reached step 3, 4, or 5 on the research track. You gain 1 victory point for every 3 resources you have of any given type. So that's 1 victory point for 3 ore, 1 victory point for 3 knowledge, 1 victory point for 3 credits. So consequently, 9 credits would gain you 3 victory points, 5 ore would gain you 1 victory point, etc. Then we've got our 2 victory conditions here. These are worth the most points. In this case, it's whoever has colonized the most different kinds of planets will gain 18 victory points. Second place will gain 12 victory points. Third place will gain 6. And fourth place gains nothing. Similarly, here we've got the number of satellites. Remember, these are the things that connect up your federations. And once you've got all of your, whoever has the most satellites will gain 18, then 12 for second place, and 6 for third. Note that if there's a joint first place, then you total up first and second place. That would be 30 and divide by 2. So each player would get 15 and third place would gain 6. So once you've added the victory points for the science research tracks, you've added the victory points for the leftover resources, and you've added the victory points for the 2 victory conditions, then that's it. The game is over. And whoever has the most victory points is the winner. In the case of a tie, players share the victory. They share it. So that just about wraps it up for Gaia Project, at least the 2 to 4 player game. If you are interested in seeing a video for the Automata version, the solo version, it's very simple, but I could throw a video together. Let me know in the comments below. I'm also thinking about doing a comparison video with Terra Mystica, which I've got, so I might put that out as well. But just let me leave you with a couple of hints and tips for Gaia Project. Just these are easily forgotten rules, really, just to sign off here. Remember that these cap your resources. You have 1 knowledge token, which means the most knowledge you can have is 15, and no more than that. You also have 1 ore token for the same reason, and 2 credit tokens because the most credits you can have is 30. Remember that only 1 player can achieve the 5th rank in the research tracks. Everyone else is gated at 4 after someone's done that. Remember that when you take a technology, you can advance in that track. However, you can only have 1 of each technology. You cannot have duplicate technologies. So there are advanced rules as well for the later times you play. It says, you can set the board out making different shapes and stuff like that. You'll notice that there are clusters of stars on the central tiles. You can see here, clusters of stars matching there, and matching here. You can see more clusters of stars matching up here as well. Those clusters are sort of designed to be put together. If they're not touching, then you might sort of break the balance of the game a bit. But, that's entirely up to you if you want to do that. The modular board allows you to be creative with the shape of your galaxy. But, you do sort of have to think about the balance of the game as well. But you can sort of flip these over to their hollow side. Those are on the 5, 6, and 7 tiles. You can rotate the tiles if you want, and do that. And if you're going to randomly put out your mines at the start of the game, you start with the first player, and you go round to the last player. The last player plays 2, and then you go back to the first player. So the first player plays both first and last mines. And then if there's a Xenos player, they play their third mine after that. And then if there's a... the Ivets, they would place their planetary institution after the Xenos mine. But that won't really matter to you because I didn't explain what all the races do. So if you'd like another video with all the races and what they do, let me know. I mean, I totally dig Terra Mystica and I really like Gaia Project, so I'm happy to keep making videos about it. But I'm aware that it might not be everyone's cup of tea and this might already have overwhelmed you. So don't worry, because I'll be back tomorrow with Ben and Alex, and we're going to be playing through a game of Gaia Project. I'm going to keep making that mistake. We're going to be playing through a game of Gaia Project. Not only that, we're going to do a speed run where we try to play the game as fast as possible so you guys can get a real idea of how the interactions work and all of that. And if you've been paying attention to this video, you might just catch us break a rule or two. We'll see if you can catch us out. And thanks so much for watching this video and for watching the channel, and I'll see you all tomorrow.